Good morning, all. So we will start our presentation about urban regeneration. We started with the concept of regeneration. That is a concept formed from biology. That is a very regular process in nature. So when we have a loss, a regeneration intervention occur, and so we can imagine we can have a new trim, a new sense of the body interested in this regeneration. Here, this picture about a crab changing his shell, I think that represent very well the concept also in the urban space. I guess now you can see the screen. I guess now you can see the full screens. Okay. So briefly, I was talking about this concept of urban regeneration as a concept born in biology, a very natural process of development of the space and all the living spaces. So why is so important this concept now in the urban processes? We detected three main categories, three main reasons. The first is the soil consumption. Especially here in Italy, we have artificial land cover for the 7.11% of the national territory, comparing to the 4.2% in the European territory. So it's the question is why continue to expand our cities if we are not growing anymore with the demographic profile. The second reason is the climate change. So the four main risk categories detected by the IPCC report are the risk of heat waves, the agricultural production, the water scarcity, the increased frequency and intensity of floods. There are all categories that influence the projection of our urban space in general. So, of course, taking is something that have to be taken into account. And the last is the advent of a crisis. We experimented the pandemic, the last crisis we faced, but it's obvious that during these years and in the future, more and more crises will happen. So it's important to set up a way of thinking our cities in order to conceiving this crisis as a possibility to change the space, change the way of living. This is a project that changed space. So an example of what can be happen, what happened affecting the space. But it's important to take also the economic part of a crisis. After a crisis, we have lots of funds in order to recover. And it's important to take this process and change it and organize it as a way of develop our cities in a more sustainable way. So we have the three topics, three way of conceiving urban regeneration. The first is rethinking infrastructure spaces, the sustainable urban mobility way. The second is shapes and urban figures of the contemporary adaptive public space. And the last, resilient community, remaking cities with enforced citizens. So I leave the floor to Alessia for the first part.
Okay, I begin the short presentation with quotes from the Italian Ministry of Infrastructure and Sustainable Mobility that says, the mobility system, including networks, carriers, and interchangers, is to a city what the circulatory system is to a human being. On the efficiency, fluidity, and capillarity of the system depends the well-being and sustainable development of the city. It's clear from the ministry's words how mobility is an extremely central phenomenon for efficiency and the existence of cities, and how interventions and policies regarding urban space must take mobility into account as a key element for the climate change and sustainability challenges. However, throughout the last century, urban planning has focused on developing environments designed only for motorized and fast travel. Today, the focus of these disciplines has changed and mobility design has taken on more complex trajectories. Sustainable infrastructure in spaces increasingly look at mobility as an option, an attitude and ability for moving. The World Business Council for Sustainable Development states that sustainable mobility means enabling people to move freely, communicate, and establish relationship without ever losing sight of human and environmental aspects. The challenges dictated by various transition and crises are forcing us to rethink infrastructure spaces differently, inevitably linked to the issues of the environment, greenery, and water resources. Moreover, the various crises of recent years and the challenges that have occurred with society have produced a large urban voice within cities, and often among these are the infrastructure space that can become a driving force for urban regeneration intervention. My contribution, therefore, will discuss the practices of urban regeneration that starts from the city's circulatory apparatus to revitalize its entire system. I will show two water infrastructure projects converted into new system and new mobility. These two projects are about 30 years apart and work on a linear infrastructure and a port space. Both infrastructure related to the theme of water and spaces of artificiality. On the one hand is the regeneration of the drained riverbed of the Turia River in Valencia, an urban stitching between the city's historic center and an expansion area. On the other hand, we find the regeneration of Copenhagen's port infrastructure, in which the city, starting from the historic center, gradually expands to colonize, evolve, and claim its relationship with the sea. These two examples show different strategies of intervention within existing urban tissue. The first project is the Turia River Garden, and the project is situated in Valencia, a city of Roman founding that is deeply linked to the waterway. Since the foundation of the city by Romans, Valencia has developed around the river. However, a river that over the centuries has caused numerous violent floods. The last and most violent was in 1957. Valencia is subjected to devastating floods that forever changed the city's relationship with the Turia River. During this catastrophic event, nearly 3/4 of the city is submerged in the flood, and 81 people lose their lives. After this crisis, it decided to implement an ambitious plan and redirect the course of the water to the south of the city, the so-called Plan Sur, in English, Southern Plan. And the Southern Plan was completed in 1959, and the course of the river that gave birth to the city was pushed out of it. The deviation of the Turia River was done to remove the danger over the city from the seasonal flooding of the river, but left a wide street of land running through the city from west to east along the historic city center. The first idea of city leads was to fill this large linear urban voids with an highway to streamline the traffic to the port. But in 1917, the city then rejected and protested against this highway under the slogan, "The Turia riverbed is ours and we want green." So the municipality decided to turn the riverbed into a park, according to the wishes of communities, demonstrating that in urban regeneration intervention, acting over the common space and landscape, in addition to gathering financial resources or political desire, opportunities should be found to carefully adapt landscape system to the perspective of the urban community settled in the place. Therefore, Ricard Bofill draws a master plan for the park, providing the structure for the riverbed divided into 18 zones. The design of a green space in the dry Turia riverbed first required an understanding of the city as a whole, its structure, forms, and functioning. The city as a framework for the intervention, and the riverbed as the city spine, were two basic concepts presiding over both the urban analysis and the design of the proposal. These are comparative pictures of the drained riverbed and the green river. Inspired by the Roman conception of public space as a meeting place, the design is based on the traces of the existing landscape and therefore on the continuous presence of water at key points to remember the lost river. The garden, the concept developed for the garden for the park is based on a philosophy of natural balance between resources and design, with a view to environmental sustainability, even though we are in the 80s. The various areas of the park create different hierarchy of effects, and the vegetation used is local, such as pine, orange, palm, and olive trees. The garden begins with a fruit forest and a lake that serves as both an irrigation reservoir, but also allows for sport and recreational activities. In the middle of the park, there is a forum for the city. This is the main space where large festivals, shows, and parties take place. In addition to the green and blue infrastructure, iconic buildings that have become symbol of the city, which are the buildings made by the architect Santiago Calatrava for the Science City Pavilion. 30 years after the project realization in 2017, the data team estimated the annual economic benefits to the city of Valencia represented by the Turia Park. The calculations were based on a tool developed by the US Department of Agriculture, and it was estimated that the trees in the park produce benefits for an annual profit of 60.5 million euros. They hold back about 4,000 million liters of water annually, and they reduce 7 million tons of CO2 each year. Despite the time spent this project, the project is a fascinating modern example of the transformative effect of landscape infrastructure on a city's identity and well-being. Born out of a crisis, Valencia has managed to integrate a recreational and soft mobility infrastructure network with its historical roots and surrounding neighborhoods. It's now difficult to imagine Valencia without its green river. That project is in Copenhagen. Copenhagen is a city that met the challenges of climate change in an exemplary way over the past 13 years. Among the various interventions made through the city, we focus on the regeneration of the port infrastructure. The old port is one of the most historic areas of Copenhagen, where most of the industries of the past were located, and within the port, it was possible to find not only naval buildings, but also apartment and residential buildings, surrounded by canals and water basins. As in most of the world's large industrial ports, with the advent of new boating practices, the industrial port district in the late 90s became outdated, and the area remained unused. In 2009, however, the largest urban development project in the Scandinavia territory, the Sustainable City of the Future, was presented. A major regeneration and redevelopment of the Harbour District, located just 4 kilometers from the city's historic center. The project is a result of an international competition, and the winning project is that of the Danish architectural studio Kobe. Sustainable mobility is the starting point for intervention already carried out in the city, that time to create a carbon neutral city by 2025, a human-friendly city with innovative mobility tools. The City Ring and metro system, inaugurated in 2099, is a loop that's running below the historic center, able to transport 72 million people annually. The projects have the future urban transformation, public transformation, subway and rail lines, both and pedestrian and bicycle must become the almost exclusive vehicle for movement within the city. This principle has also been adopted in the regeneration of the port redevelopment project. The new district is connected to the principal system, anchoring another loop to serve the new neighborhood. Connected to the public transport loop, there is a large green loop, a bicycle highway connecting the district with the city. To achieve this, Norway is designed as a 5-minute neighborhood, a neighborhood where it takes no more than a 5-minute walk to reach a public transport stop. The project involves the division of the district into 11 island neighborhoods connected by the construction of navigable and swimmable canals. The planning of the island is open-ended. They are planned one at a time. The master plan is not a vision of the city that specifies every detail, but instead like a flexible guidelines. The development plan for the neighborhood involves the construction of square, pedestrian street, and gathering space, all of which are designed to make mobility and sociality easy. The buildings range from 3 to 6 floors to maintain the original characters of Danish architecture, and the intention, of course, to give the water its role through the creation of promenade on the sea and a series of landing spaces and residential near the sea. Mobility here is mainly characterized by the integrated use of subway and bicycle with public transport. The structure of the street is designed just so that pedestrian, bicyclists, and public transport can move more quickly and by car. The street and the urban space have been designed and built as intimate pedestrian-friendly environment. As we say, the starting point of the entire generation is at the thinking of mobility. Here, differently from Valencia, the new mobility is based on the joint use of bicycles and equipment for the so-called soft mobility and public transportation. Therefore, more metro stations take a central role of the programmatic level and the architectural level. They acquire well-defined character. The first station built are on an underground station and a surface station. Again, by the Studio Kobe, together with the company Arup. No, I think.
So the second part.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm trying to be very brief because Alessia took all my time. I'm joking. So the argument is shape and urban figures of the contemporary adaptive public space. That is something we saw before a little bit in the previous presentations. But I want to give you a different point of view to complete a little bit this argument. So the first question is why open space? Because we have three possible definitions of public space today. It's a connective infrastructure because we see our cities, this fragmented condition of the contemporary city, this spread city all over the territory, and the open space is the most characteristic, let's say, element of this condition. It's a social infrastructure because it's the support of the public activity. So it's the place where the humans do the collective and this collective and public practice. And it's also an ecological infrastructure that can solve a lot of problems about many different kinds of risks that today we are let's say facing very often. So the ground design, the ground is the physical element that gives the physical aspect to the open space, and the shape of the ground could be a sort of key of reading about the adaptive project in this way to connect these three different definitions about connective infrastructure and ecological infrastructure and public infrastructure. So we can look at the ground, which is not a neutral, let's say, plane. It's something that could be modified and could be altered in a three-dimensional way. So changing this height from positive heights, so making platform and something like this, concave shapes, so excavating the ground and producing those negative heights, or work on its surface, so superficial shapes, subdividing the soil and paving it or depaving it or putting into it different elements and with different shapes. So starting from the ecological side of the question, we can see how this catalog, brief catalog of adaptive solutions are strongly linked with the shapes of the ground. It's not important to take a long time on this, but if we see at those classical, let's say, solutions, so floodable basins, wet ponds, water squares, rain gardens, and all those draining systems are all about, of course, it's most of these are nature-based solutions, so they use the nature to face these problems, but it's also a problem of shape. So if you see in this section, the shape of the ground is important to manage the water risk and also the temperature risk, because it's somehow linked together, those two problems. Other examples, and we see how, of course, this shape of the ground is important to face those problems. So the question is, starting from this catalog, how to translate those technical devices, those technical tools into something which is not only monofunctional stuff. So technical device that should become a public space in the end. So in something that could work also in the moments where the emergency and the catastrophic event is not happening. So the aim is to transform from technological and performative devices into public adaptive spaces. And also, so this is something that can link together the definition of ecological infrastructure and public infrastructure. And the third question is how those public space can regenerate the city, and how it could be a sort of connective infrastructure, as I said before in the introduction. So we can figure out three strategies, starting from the small scale to the big scale. So the frame, a punctual intervention in the city, the interface, which is a sort of space in between that links together two different conditions. It could be from the city to the agricultural landscape, to the city, from the city to the riverside or the seaside, or a natural condition. And in the bigger scale, how the intervention can connect different parts of the territory, so in a wider view, and bring together all the parts of the city and regenerate it. So if we see, this is a sort of map and a sort of chronological line that identifies how the adaptive public space think in this way can be recognized in all around the world, especially in the Europe, where you can see the most density of black dots. And now in the last 20 years, we have an intensification of this project, especially, of course, in the Europe, as you can see in the map. So I want to share you 3 examples, starting from this progression from the small scale to the big scale. Starting from the small scale, I chose this project, which is interesting. It's the Solanel Plaza. It's in Fribourg, in Germany. The project is realized, and it was realized in 2011. Here you can see the map that shows how this point is a sort of urban void inside a strange and confused urban tissue. And this is the intervention. It's a project that works in this square. And those are the images. In the end, this is a rain garden, talking with a technical language. And this is, let's say, a square that, as you can see in the schemes on the right, that is a sort of security place for the flooding relative to the rain. And when the rain is heavy, this part of the square is floodable, and the other part is safe. So it's the water changed the way to use this square when the flood is intense. But then it can be used also in the other moment when the emergency is not present. And it's a beautiful place that is also linked to the place because it was a next railway station. So you can see the rails into the pavement that gives the let's say the design to this space, and it's a public space. It's a classical square, let's say, but it works also in the adaptive way. This is the second one. It's about the interface, so a condition between the city and the seaside. And in the end, this is a dike, so it manages the water, protecting the city from the high level of the sea. This is the condition, a strip in between the beach and the city. And this is the solution. We can see how they use those modulation of the ground with those dunes, let's say, that can build a public space. In the end, it's a public space to link the city to the sea, but it also has the capability to protect the city from the water of the sea. So we can see also a parking garage below, underground. And this is the third one. I choose. It's Crocodile Climate Adaptation. This is also it's in Copenhagen and it's realized recently. And this is a classical example of networking because it's a project composed of 35 singular interventions. And as you can see in the map with those red dots, and you can see how these parts are linked together to manage the water problem from the city to the river. So the water flows from small basins and step by step they go to the river side. And this is the condition. You can see the first row. In the first row there is the more urban photograph of the intervention. So you can see how the shape of the ground is important to configure this space in the adaptive way, but also in a public space. And this second row shows how the design changes while it's going to the natural landscape of the river, but it's everything something like places and shapes that are used for the water management and also for the public activity, collective activity. So in the end, I want to leave you with a sort of provocation because, of course, we saw how the shape of the ground is important to make those three definitions of the contemporary public space as a connective infrastructure, ecological infrastructure, and connective infrastructure. But it also has to have an aesthetic value. So maybe what is happening is a sort of moving to the land art, to trying to find the inspiration from the land art, as we can see with this comparison of photographs, different projects but similar shapes. One is land art, one is a protection tool, an adaptive tool. So maybe this is the way we are, let's say, moving in. And I leave the floor to Ludovica. I hope I was in time.
No.
Not really.
No.
No?
No, but I'm here only to stress out the immaterial part of conceiving these regeneration processes, taking into account the communities. I want to repeat some key concepts that were presented before. So the material action that we can project for the urban regeneration have to be enveloped with some immaterial action too. This led us to respond to the condition of participation, network, and temporal continuity that Europe stressed out in all the calls in this theme. So it's conceiving the city as a space for experimentation. So it's proposed a new living condition in which people learn to accept new assets. So using the words of an important sociology, somehow the disorder of the city through the human experience. It does not exclude nor label, it does not eliminate unwanted behaviors, but aims to listen them according to the principle of resilience. I will present briefly two examples of how the material part of the urban regeneration can be approached as tactical urbanism, and the immaterial part of civic pageants, a concept used by Geddes. These are principally bottom-up processes. In this process in Paris, the Archiviazione Association detected the more interesting places where to starting a collaborative way of thinking function and retaking the public space from the community directly. this quote, we cannot talk about the commons without talking about its actors. So they used some devices that were easily to assemble, imagine directly with citizens and adaptable use spaces. All were self-built and can be easily repaired and moved to the space. These were, they constructed some photos of them, so very easily intervention in the space. The second way is the second approach where the urban facades intervened on the ground floor, so easily reached even by the children that participate in the realization, and working on the ground connection and integration of the urban dispositives. The last are signs on the grounds that helps to let people think about the reappropriation, the space reappropriation of the public space, take some space from the mobility, the mobility of cars and other devices. All these strategies were focused on new functions. So each material is the direct intervention of residents who can change uses, move dispositions, and dispose of free areas where they can organize freely community events. The second and more known project in Milan. It's not exactly a bottom-up process, but it's a bottom-up promoted from up. So a new way of conceiving the bottom-up processes in order to let them grow and have more funds and efficient action in the space. With Strade Aperte in Milan from 2019. They use mostly signs on the ground with this painting to pedestrianize the parts of the streets and highlight crossings. So the pedestrian was the principal actor in order to imagine a city, not for the cars, but exactly for the people. The devices used were very easily conceived, so some trees, some benches, and some places where to play for the children. And the use of the urban voids, so they detected some voids in the dense texture of the city of Milan in order to promote the public relation in public space and free area space. The main idea was that of linking the main function of the cities. In this example, a kindergarten were linked with this pedestrianized street to a public park. And so, and a very interesting example where the economic activities take this place and somehow organize actively the space in front of their activities. You saw some picture that seems not so interesting, not so fascinating, but this was because the tactical urbanism, this process, are in a temporary conception. So where in the areas where the tactical approach results more efficient, the municipality intervene with more funds and with more structural intervention, like this one. So concluding this lecture with so many different cases, it's important to take these regeneration processes as an important living step of the city, and embracing all the complexity of the subject living in the city and all the problem we are facing nowadays. So thank you very much.